Save it for the end. Thank you, John, for the kind introduction and for your great work as chairman. You know, I used to be in the entertainment business, and where you can pretty much say anything you want, and I have to keep reminding myself that in politics, it's very different, and I just got to keep reminding myself not to say certain things, and I want to thank John for reminding me so dramatically when he was on The Daily Show. Thank you for that. It's great to be here in San Diego, and it's great to see California Democrats so fired up. One reason we're all fired up is that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals did the right thing and ruled that Prop 8 is unconstitutional. It really was a well-written ruling. At one point, the majority wrote that the only effect of Prop 8 was to, quote, lessen the status and human dignity of gays and lesbians, to which proponents of Prop 8 replied, yeah, and this is a big year for Democrats everywhere, and especially for California Democrats. You have a lot of work to do. Deliver this huge batch of electoral votes for President Obama. Win more than half a dozen congressional seats that haven't been competitive in a decade. Defeat this anti-worker ballot initiative. Put California back on a sound fiscal track by sending legislators to Sacramento who will work with Governor Brown. And maybe most important to me, send the magnificent Dianne Feinstein back to the U.S. Senate. You know, only 100 people get to serve in the Senate, and each state gets only 2. So if you're going to trust your state's voice to 2 people, both of them had better be fighters. In California, you've done good work on that count. There is, of course, Barbara Boxer, one of the Senate's foremost progressive champions, and someone who's been a terrific friend of mine for years. Anytime there's a debate on choice, on the environment, on the economy, anytime progressive values are at stake, Barbara is there, making her voice heard loud and clear. And in recent months, I've had the privilege of standing with Dianne in her fight to preserve our civil liberties and to defend the Constitution. As you might know, Congress recently passed a law that, among other things, could authorize the indefinite detention of United States citizens by our military. Let me repeat that. The indefinite detention of United States citizens by our military. Now, we walked this dangerous path 60 years ago by interning tens of thousands of Japanese Americans here on the West Coast and in Hawaii. It was wrong to let fear and prejudice guide us then, even in the frightening and confusing days following the attack on Pearl Harbor. It would be inexcusable if we made the same mistake now, a decade after 9/11. And America that detains its own citizens without charge or trial is not the America I know and love. It's not the America California Democrats know and love. It's not the America Dianne Feinstein knows and loves, and that's why we need her voice in the United States Senate. Of course, Barbara and Dianne come from a long line of great Californians, a line that includes Democrats like Jerry Brown, Jesse Unruh, Nancy Pelosi, and even Republicans like Clint Eastwood. By now, most of us have seen the remarkable Super Bowl ad in which Clint proclaimed that it's halftime in America. It was a tremendously moving message, not just about the resilience of Detroit and the auto industry, but about the resilience of America itself. And the truth is, we are in a tough spot. Our economy has suffered a devastating blow, and while we are turning things around, people are still hurting, and they are still worried. But we have been here before as a nation. In fact, we've been in worse holes. Today, our national debt is 93% of our GDP, and that's scary. But after World War II, our national debt was 121% of our GDP. Of course, we had something to show for it. We had won World War II. But we were in a hole, and we fought our way back. And looking how we got off the mat after World War II should give us hope, but it should give us something else as well, a roadmap. We Democrats want to rebuild our nation now the same way we did then, by investing in ourselves, in American education, infrastructure, and innovation. We invested in education in the GI Bill, making it possible for millions of our returning heroes to go to college. We invested in infrastructure, building 40,000 miles of highways that greatly reduced the cost of transporting goods. And we invested in innovation. We sent a man to the moon, actually a number of them, and got them back. And out of the space program came all sorts of useful technologies, from personal computers to satellite telecommunications, that spawned entire new industries. In 1957, I was 6 years old, and my brother Owen was 11. That was the year that the Soviets launched Sputnik. Suddenly, the Soviets had nuclear weapons and were ahead of us in space. Americans were terrified. My parents set me and my brother down, set us down in our living room in Minnesota and said to us, "You boys are going to study math and science to beat the Soviets." Now, I thought that was a lot of pressure to put on a 6-year-old. But we were obedient sons, and so Owen and I studied math and science, and we enjoyed it. And wouldn't you know, my parents were right. We beat the Soviets. Owen and I beat the Soviets. You're welcome. Anyway, that's the secret formula: education, infrastructure, innovation. We invested in ourselves after World War II, and it paid off in a generation of incredible prosperity that was shared by Americans from every walk of life. Between 1947 and 1977, as our nation experienced 3 decades of growth, wages for the top fifth of workers rose by 99%. And the wages of those in the bottom fifth rose by 116%. Now, I know that's hard to believe. The wages of the bottom fifth grew more than the wages of the top fifth. Really, that happened. We weren't just a nation with a few obscenely rich people, but a nation in which people who will never be obscenely rich can build real economic prosperity and security for them and their families and give their kids opportunities that they never had. Now, take my family, for example. The Frankens moved to Albert Lea, Minnesota from New Jersey when I was 4 years old. My dad never graduated high school and never really had a career as such, but my mom's father, an immigrant from Russia, owned a factory out east that made quilting. And he gave my dad a chance to open up a quilting plant in Albert Lea, a small city in southern Minnesota near the Iowa border. Well, the factory failed, and we moved up to the Twin Cities a couple years later. And years later, when it occurred to me to ask, I asked my dad, why Albert Lea? And my dad said, well, that's how my dad talked. He was from the East, and he smoked the pipe, inhaled the pipe. He said, your grandfather wanted to start a factory in the Midwest, and the railroad went through Albert Lea. I said, and why did the factory fail? Well, it went through Albert Lea, but it wouldn't stop. Now, my dad was a great guy, really he was, but he was a terrible businessman. After the factory failed, we moved up to a suburb of Minneapolis. My dad got a job as a printing salesman. We lived in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. We weren't rich by any means, but we were secure, and I felt like the luckiest kid in the world, and I was. I was growing up middle class in a time when growing up middle class in America meant that there would be a job for my dad, good schools for me to prepare myself for a career, and if I worked hard and played by the rules, a chance for me to do anything I wanted, including being a comedy writer and a senator. In that order. And because middle-class families like mine were enjoying economic security, they were able to buy more things. So there was more demand, so there were more jobs, so there were more people paying taxes, so we had more revenues to reinvest right back into our country. Year after year, decade after decade, under Democratic leadership and Republican leadership, it worked. And because we reinvested that revenue into building a strong social safety net, with each generation, more and more poor families were able to climb into the middle class. Take, for example, my wife Franny's family. When Franny was 17 years old, her dad, a decorated World War II vet, died in a car accident, leaving my future mother-in-law widowed with 5 kids at age 29. That family made it because of Social Security survivor benefits. Sometimes at the end of the month, they ate fried dough for dinner. Sometimes they turned the heat off on her family, and this is Portland, Maine. So it was cold, but they made it. And they made it because of Social Security survivor benefits. Every single one of the 4 girls in Franny's family went to college thanks to Pell Grants and other scholarships. My brother-in-law, Neil, went into the Coast Guard and became an electrical engineer. My mother-in-law, after the one younger than Franny, Bootsy, went to high school, my mother-in-law got herself a $300 GI loan to fix the roof on their house, but instead used it to go to the University of Maine. And she got 3 more scholarships, graduated, became an elementary school teacher. She taught Title I kids, so she had all, or poor kids, so she had all her loans forgiven. Every one of that family, she and all 5 of those kids became productive members of society. They pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. They pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, but first they had to have the boots. And because we were smart and because we invested in ourselves, our government was able to give Franny's family the boots. Things are very different today. Our infrastructure is crumbling. We're lagging behind other countries in innovation. Our kids are falling behind the rest of the world, especially when it comes to math and science. Skills that our kids will need to compete in the 21st century economy. Not that long ago, our country was first in the world in the percentage of our population that had graduated from college. Now, today, we are 16th in the world. And because we haven't been making those investments like we used to, we're still struggling to rebuild what we lost in the Great Recession. Sure, some people are doing really, really well, but millions of families aren't. No matter how hard they work, they're not getting ahead if they can find work. And poor families are falling further and further behind. It isn't as easy to make it to the middle class as it used to be, and being middle class doesn't mean what it used to mean. And we should be having a contest of ideas about how to fix that. Democrats can propose doing the same things we did after World War II, investing in infrastructure, innovation, and education, things that worked. Republicans can propose doing the same things we did during the Bush administration. Big tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans, massive deregulations, and more subsidies for powerful corporate interests. The things that have never worked, ever. That's how we're supposed to respond to a crisis in America. Everyone gets in a room together, bringing their best ideas to the table. We debate, we vote, and then we act. That's what our political system is for. But Republicans are at a different meeting. The Republican leader in the Senate said it himself right after the most recent election, the 2010 election. He came out and he said it. He said, quote, "The single most important thing we want to achieve is for President Obama to be a one-term president." Which brings me back to Clint Eastwood. Somehow, his Super Bowl ad became controversial. Why? How can optimism cheerleading for an American comeback be controversial? Who is against that? Who has ever been against that, ever? Watching Republicans complain about that ad is like watching someone root for the dealer in blackjack. But that's the sort of thing you do when you've decided that your top priority, the single most important thing you want to achieve, isn't getting more people jobs. It isn't balancing the budget. It isn't becoming energy independent. It isn't making sure our kids have a great education. That's not on our agenda. It's about winning an election. It is astounding to think that Republicans believe that defeating President Obama is worth throwing the middle class under the bus. It is astounding to think that they see an American comeback as a political threat. But that's how they have behaved. Time after time over the past 2 years, Democrats have come to the table with ideas. But Republicans simply won't let us act. It's not that they necessarily disagree with our ideas. In fact, many of these ideas have enjoyed bipartisan support in the past. For Republicans, the problem isn't how we want to fix the economy. It's that letting us fix the economy at all would hurt them politically, they think. We've pointed out roads and bridges that are in desperate need of repair. We've identified advanced manufacturing jobs that are going unfilled and the laid-off manufacturing workers who, with some job training, could fill them. We've shown them that business leaders are pleading with us to invest in STEM education. That's science, technology, engineering, and math, so that our kids can compete for the jobs of the 21st century, but Republicans won't let us act. They're so intent on stopping us from acting at a time when working families are struggling as badly as they have in half a century that they are holding the payroll tax cut extension hostage so that they can demand more tax breaks for people who are wealthier than any people have ever been in the history of the world. And at a time when keeping our social safety net strong is more important than ever, they're demanding that we pay for those tax breaks for the wealthy with radical cuts to Medicare and Medicaid. These aren't the actions of a party with its own vision of an American comeback. They are the actions of a party whose vision is all about political gain. Let me give you another example. Congress passed a bill called the Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. The House passed it on December 11th, 2009. The Senate passed it on May 20th, 2010. President Obama signed the legislation on July 21st, 2010. This bill is now a law. It has been a law for a year and a half. And one of the things in the law is the creation of a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, an agency with the sole responsibility of looking out for the American people when they interact with the financial sector. But Republicans have refused to confirm a director for the new agency, not just Elizabeth Warren, whom they can't stand because she happens to be an outspoken and brilliant progressive. They have refused to confirm anyone. When President Obama nominated Richard Cordray, the extremely qualified Attorney General of Ohio, they refused to let him have an up or down vote. Not because he wasn't qualified. In fact, they all said he was. Not because they thought someone else should be in charge of the agency. They obstructed that nomination because they didn't want the law that Congress had passed and that the president had signed from going into effect. Article 1 of the Constitution says that Congress gets to write laws. Article 2 says the president gets to sign them and that the executive branch gets to implement them. And Article 3 does not say unless the minority party in the Senate wishes they hadn't passed. Earlier this year, President Obama made a recess appointment so that Richard Cordray could get to work. And so that the American people could have a cop on the consumer protection beat, and Republicans howled. One senator even said he would obstruct every single nomination this president makes until he rescinds that appointment. For today's Republican Party, it's not enough to obstruct legislation up for debate. They're obstructing laws that have already passed. And instead of writing bills to change those laws and letting us vote on them, they've invented the retroactive filibuster. You know, people look at Congress and they listen to the way Washington is described in the news, and they imagine two parties that just can't compromise for the good of the country, a pox on both our houses. But that's not what's happening. What's happening here is that one party just isn't interested in a contest of ideas. They're interested in a contest of power. And to win it, they're opposing things that they used to support. They're willing to hold important legislation hostage. They're willing to shut down the government and let us default on our debts. They're willing to undermine the Constitution. And the question is, what are we going to do about it? The answer is simple. It's time for some negative reinforcement. Republicans are willing to abdicate their leadership role in order to win an election. They've put their money down on the dealer. And we have to show them that this is a bad bet. If the only thing they care about is winning, then the only thing we can do to change their behavior is to beat them. From the White House on down. That's going to take total commitment from every single one of us. It's not enough to complain about today's Republican Party and the things that they want to do to our country. We have to go out there and work. I learned a lot about what it takes to win in 2008. Some of you may remember I had a close election. I won by 312 votes. And when I think about winning by 312 votes, I think about all the people I met during the campaign who I know for a fact knocked on more than 312 doors, or made more than 312 phone calls, or gave us the $20 that helped us run a radio ad that reached more than 312 Minnesotans. I think about all the volunteers who came in, even though their car broke down and they had to take the bus, all the staffers and interns who gave up their summers, and some who gave up 2 years of their lives to work 20-hour days, all the supporters who got tired or busy or frustrated, but still did the hard work that wins elections. When you win an election by 312 votes, you think about all the individuals who each literally could have been the one who made the difference. And I know who they are. It's actually quite a burden. Because when I go around Minnesota, I see these people and I have to thank them. Each and every one of them. And I tell each of them that they could be the reason that I'm in Washington. You're the reason I won. It's a real pain. But that's what we have to do. Republicans have shown that they're willing to grind this government to a halt to win an election. We have to show them that we are willing to do what it takes to win anyway. We have to make the phone calls and knock on the doors, even when the weather is bad, which is something that happens in places that aren't San Diego. We have to annoy our friends who haven't decided who to vote for and the ones who haven't decided whether they're even going to vote. We have to show up at rallies. We have to click on links in fundraising emails. And when we're done doing all those things for Democrats near us, we have to do them for Democrats around the country. In fact, I'd like to do something right now. I'd like to do something right now, if I could. Everyone here has a phone, right? Okay? Just about everyone has a phone. Okay. And most of you probably have smartphones that have calendars on them, right? Okay, now I want you to take out your phone. Go ahead. And I want you to go to the calendar and hold it up like you're at a U2 concert. And I'm Bono, okay? Good. Look back there. It looks pretty. It looks beautiful. There we go. Okay. Now, you have to bring them down, because what I want you to do is go onto your calendar, go to November. Election Day is November 6th. And that means November 3rd, 4th, and 5th are get-out-the-vote days. Now go ahead and block them off. Just write GOTV. And in the notes sections, put because Al said so. Do this. Put it in your calendar now. Don't schedule a vacation for those days. Don't schedule a school board meeting. Don't schedule a cooking class. You're doing GOTV those days. Many of you have families. Ignore them. Trust me, an 8-year-old can take care of himself for 3 days. Just leave him with a few cans of ravioli and a can opener. He'll be fine. And besides, the reason people get into politics in the first place is to spend less time with their families. I know this. I know this because when they resign, they always say it's to spend more time with their families. One of my heroes is Paul Wellstone. Paul once said, "The future belongs to those who are passionate and work hard." And no matter what stunts Republicans pull in Washington, no matter how frustrating our politics can be, no matter what challenges we will come to face, elections are always our best chance to prove Paul right. So thank you for your passion. Thank you for the hard work you're going to do between now and Election Day. Thank you, California.